So for the first time on the channel, we are going to have a 2-week, 2-part review, as at the channel point's request of Blade, over this week and next week, we're going to review the 2-part miniseries of Stephen King's It, released in 1990. Adapted from the novel written by King 4 years earlier, it revolves around an evil monster named Pennywise, which transforms itself into the worst fears of young children in an attempt to scare them and kill them. The miniseries was aired on November 18th and November 20th on ABC, and in an attempt to boost the viewership, they exaggerated more of the positive themes of the novel, trying to make, maybe the characters a little bit more happy and all that, and kind of led a little bit away from the book in that sense, because, they were trying to attract a casual audience. It had a much bigger production budget than most television shows, around $12 million. However, it paid off because it was ABC's biggest success of 1990. Between the two parts, it pulled in around 30 million viewers. However, 31 years later, and especially in more recent years, the reception towards the miniseries has become a bit more divided. With the success of the two films released in 2017 and 2019, the first film actually becoming the most successful horror movie of all time and the only horror movie to ever break $700 million, in addition to those two movies being more faithful towards the book, this miniseries has kind of gotten the shaft a little bit by a lot of people because, well, those big Hollywood movies were better. However, most people just remember this for Tim Curry's incredible portrayal of Pennywise the Clown. It's legitimately one of the best horror villain performances ever. Like, if you're gonna watch this for anything, watch it for him. He was absolutely fantastic. The first part, which we're gonna review today, is also often looked at as the better part, and I can kinda see why, as we'll get into this a little bit next week, but I feel like the child actors actually had better chemistry together than the adult actors did, and you would think it would be the obvious, because the adult actors are adults, they're more experienced, but the chemistry between the child actors was very good, and honestly, even though it gets a bad rap and nobody remembers it for much nowadays outside of Curry, I think they all did a very good job. You might actually recognize some of the cast from this as well, which included Jonathan Brandis, Seth Green, Emily Perkins. Everyone I just mentioned there went on to have pretty successful careers, some of them super successful careers, and you can easily see why by their early performances in this film. But I think it's about time to get into it, and it's about time to find out if these kids were able to survive Pennywise the Clown, as we review It, released in 1990, Part 1. So our film begins in May 1990 in the town of Derry, Maine, where a young girl named Lori Ann is returning home from school. Before she can go inside with her mother, she's confronted by a creepy-ass clown hiding out in her laundry. And while the kill is not shown because this movie was made for television, the clown murders her, and it's implied that he basically completely maimed her and that there wasn't much left of her body. The town librarian named Mike, who's lived in Derry for over 30 years, descends on the scene, and he seems overly concerned with the rise of children murder in Derry, as it appears he's seen this before. He then places a call to his old friend named Bill, who now lives in England, and informs Bill that It has returned. We then jump to 30 years earlier in the year 1960, where Bill is just a young kid with a stuttering problem. He gifts his younger brother Georgie a brand new sailboat in which he takes out into the rain to go sail. The sailboat ends up going down a storm drain, however, but luckily there's a nice creepy-ass clown down there to retrieve it for him. Georgie reaches down to get the sailboat from the clown, but the clown bites his arm off, and again, they didn't show it, but apparently Georgie died from blood loss. And back in the year 1990, Bill's stutter reforms, and he informs his wife Audra that he has to go back to Derry to deal with it. Mike then also places a call to another old friend named Ben, who is now an architect. Back in 1960, Ben has just moved to Derry, Maine, where he develops a crush on a girl he meets named Beverly Marsh. He's then attacked and bullied by Henry Bowers, as well as his gang including Victor Chris and Belch Huggins. Ben ends up escaping into a creek area and hiding in a storm drain, while Bowers and his gang descend upon Bill and his friend Eddie, who has asthma. After the gang leaves, Ben reemerges and then waits with Eddie, while Bill goes to get Eddie a new inhaler. They all quickly become fast friends and make a plan to build a dam within the creek. After having a fight with his cousin who him and his mom are now living with, Ben then returns to the creek where he has a vision of his dead dad holding some balloons, who then transforms into Pennywise the Clown. Back in the year 1990, Beverly is now a fashion designer and business partners with her boyfriend named Tom. Later that night, Beverly gets the call from Mike and Pax to go back to Derry, but Tom doesn't take too kindly to this, as turns out he's super abusive. Beverly has enough of his shit though and fights back against him before telling him that if he ever comes near her again, she'll kill him. So yeah, it's a pretty clear breakup right there, dude. Unfortunately for Beverly, this is not the first time she's dealt with abuse either, as back in 1960, Ben leaves her a love poem at her door, which indirectly ends up getting her beat by her dad. It's not Ben's fault, he didn't know, but damn, that's fucked up. Ben then invites her down to the creek though to meet Eddie and Bill, and looks like she has a little bit of a crush on Bill. They also meet their other friends, Richie and Stan, see if you can tell which one is Seth Green, and they all get to work on building that dam. Later that night at her house, Beverly hears voices coming from her sink before a whole bunch of blood shoots up from it. And despite the sink and herself being covered in blood, for whatever reason, her dad can't see it. And I accidentally forgot to mention this earlier, so time to double back a little bit. There was also an incident earlier where Bill was looking for a photo album of Georgie, and the photo album was covered in blood, which he could see, but for whatever reason, his parents couldn't see. Back in 1990, Eddie also gets the call, and he's still living with his mother, but he's also a successful businessman. Back in 1960, the group all go to see a werewolf movie before they notice Henry Bowers and friends below them, and Richie drops a soda on them. A little bit later, Eddie's overprotective mother didn't want him to shower at school so he doesn't catch germs from the other kids or whatever, so later on he showers by himself. All the showers then turn on at the same time though and start to attack him, and then out of the drain, here's Pennywise. We then flash back to 1990 again, where Richie, who's now a successful stand-up comedian, also gets the call from Mike. Back in 1960, the kids are all confronted by a cop who tells them to stay together in a group at all times because kids around town keep getting murdered. The next day in the cafeteria, Richie and Stan notice the others are looking down, and they're not because they're the only ones who haven't experienced Pennywise yet. Richie and Henry Bowers then get into it, which ends up with Richie accidentally spilling his food on a teacher, and the teacher sends him down to the basement to go get a mop from the janitor. But Richie does not find the janitor, oh no, he finds the Wolfman, who ends up transforming into Pennywise the Clown. An hour into the film, we now get to meet young Mike, who's finally moved to Derry, and he's harassed by Henry and his gang. And I do want to warn you, if you're sensitive to this and you plan on watching this movie, Henry is very racist, and he does use the N-word with the hard R multiple times. The gang end up chasing Mike to where our main character group is hanging out, and Henry dubs them the Losers Club. They decide to roll with that and also say fuck you by pelting Henry and the gang with rocks. Mike officially joins the Losers Club, and they're now a lucky 7, and then he shows them a book he just happens to have about Pennywise the Clown. One of the older pictures then turns into a moving picture, and Pennywise, through said picture, threatens to kill them all. They all then confess their encounters with the clown, well except for Stan because he never had one, and then Bill realizes that it must have been Pennywise who murdered Georgie. They then decide there's only one thing to do. They all gotta go down into the sewers where Pennywise lives and kill it themselves. Back in 1990 again, Stan, who lives with his wife, is the last to get the call from Mike, and it leaves him very shooken up, so he decides to go take a bath. Back in 1960, the kids plan their descent into the sewers, and they decide they need to shoot some silver at Pennywise using Richie's mom's silver earrings, and they determine that Beverly is the best shot. They then begin to make their way down to the sewers, but unfortunately, Henry and the gang sees them and begin to follow them. Henry has Victor go around another way by himself, however, to head them off, and Victor's attacked and murdered by Pennywise. While the group looks for Pennywise, Henry and Belch ambush Stan, and they're preparing to kill him before they too are ambushed by Pennywise. Belch is then sucked into the sewer by Pennywise before being spat back out, and the sight of this turns Henry's hair completely white. Stan then regroups with the gang, and they're ambushed by Pennywise, so they form a circle to try to head him off. Unfortunately, Pennywise breaks the circle by taking Stan hostage. Man, Stan is just not having a good time. Pennywise is preparing to eat Stan, however Eddie utilizes the power of imagination and imagines that his inhaler is filled with acid, and turns out It is. Beverly then shoots the silver earrings at Pennywise, which puts a massive glowing hole in his head and sends him down the drain. The kids contemplate going down in there after him, but they hear what sounds like dying noises and just assume, yeah, I guess he's dead. They then leave the sewer completely normally with nothing else happening, and if you're wondering why I'm mentioning that, go look up what happens in the book. Go look up how they get out of the sewer in the book if you want to be traumatized. But anyway, they all then make a pact that if it ever comes back, they'll return to stop it. And then part 1 ends on just a terrible note, with Stan's wife going to check up on him in the bathroom, and she's found that Stan has committed suicide by slitting his wrists, with in his blood on the wall, the word "it" being written. Honestly, this first part again just makes me feel terrible for Stan. I mean, out of everybody's careers in the future, it seems like even though he wasn't unsuccessful, he had a nice house and he had a wife, it seems like he was the least successful, and just, God, I don't know why he was singled out, but poor him, man. He just had the worst possible time. I'm going to save a more overall review for the second part next week, but to review part 1, tremendous. Again, I thought all the child actors did a very good job. Again, I thought the child actor parts were better acted than the adult actor parts. Not shitting on the adult actors, but I just thought the children had such good chemistry together. Like, their chemistry was like they had known each other for a long time. Tim Curry, again, did incredible. The plot was very good, even though it was a bit, the emotion was ramped up a little bit and it was a bit happier than the book. At the same time, it wasn't, because god damn, that shit with Stan really hit hard. And as another scene from the book, I'm really glad they didn't include. And again, go look it up. You'll be traumatized, but go look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. But overall, a very good start to this miniseries, and again, we'll give more of an overall recap next week when we review part 2 of it. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for my review of part 1 of Stephen King's It miniseries released in 1990. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, be sure to leave the video a like. If you didn't like it, then don't. If you want to follow any of my social media links, they're all in the description down below. Thank you to all 79 of my patrons for supporting me and all my channels. I appreciate you guys. With all that being said though, my name is Noah Taff. This has been part 1 of my review of the It miniseries from 1990. We'll be back here with part 2 next week, and I'll see you guys then. Bye guys.